my family of 6, 4 kids, my wife and I'm the only person who is not autistic. You know, this is a bit out of the ordinary. I mean, as a parent, I'm hopelessly outnumbered. Yeah, she's autistic, and by the time we were pregnant with our 4th, we're like, we really hope this child's autistic because we don't know how to deal with a neurotypical one. So we're kind of hoping it's autistic. It's research. It's not just some random collection of YouTube clips that someone's put together saying, you know, is your kid looking like Dustin Hoffman from Rain Man? It's not like that. Let's not wait 2 years to find out they're not, and then another 2 years to find out whatever it is. You know, you don't necessarily have to wait 2 years before you can do something. Nothing to lose. You learn more about another aspect of our community. Again, it's all I know because I don't have any neurotypical children. I have kids tearing the house down playing because they don't respond to certain situations in a way that someone who is not. And when you throw PDA in the mix, then that gets really spicy and gets a bit interesting. Yes, it's good. You know, what did you learn? And then he might parrot back the question back to me like, oh, what did you learn? Dragon. I'm like, oh, Pachycephalosaurus. Pretty good locks and a pretty good fence. That's a tricky question, quote unquote problematic. The term non-verbal is, once you develop and embed a routine, the next step in that routine becomes a demand. So we're often late to appointments. Our kids don't know what the weather was in 1973 on a Monday, or that's not us. Oh, Peppa Pig. Yeah.
George loves dinosaurs. We suspect George is...
And you ask him what's his favourite dinosaur. He knew all the planets, he knew the asteroids, he knew the dwarf planets, he could tell you facts about Neptune, Pluto, which one's the hottest, all that sort of stuff. It was really cool and it was fun. His special interest waned. And we're talking like scary monsters, we're not talking like cookie monsters, we're talking like jump scare kind of stuff. And so the adult autistic community came back to us and said, we know what's make-believe and we know what's not. It's such and such, you know, it's mucky, it's Haumea. Earning potential aside, you're never too old to learn, but you only get one childhood.
CDS kind of like, because of COVID and other, you know, less doctors, less pediatricians in New Zealand now. It blew up to about 2 years. That was last year. I don't know now. I don't have any info.
I'm not surprised to hear that at all.
Yeah. But I think that Detect will be able to like give you an idea. At least you know where you're at in position wise while waiting for the formal diagnosis.
A lot of the supports you can get that you can get without requiring a diagnosis. You don't need the government to give you a stamp. Sure, there's a lot of support you can access once they don't. If you do, I'm not going to say that say that's not a thing, but I would maybe advise anyone who's in the wait list or thinking about joining the wait list is that you don't necessarily have to wait 2 years before you can do something. You can start reading now, start learning now. I mean, one of the things I learnt in the courses I went to and the things I've learnt just raising my children is that a lot of the toolkit I have with my kids maps so well onto other kids that it's great, you know. Thinking about just communication, like the use of a visual aid. I might give my child 2 choices. You want chicken nuggets for dinner tonight or 2 minute noodles or something. They hold one fist up and another fist up and they can tap which fist is to which selection, and that doesn't hurt anyone, doesn't harm anyone, but it's a great way of communicating to anybody to emphasize the choices. And so a lot of those sort of skills and tips and tricks you can learn map on great, you know, whether your child is autistic or not. So don't necessarily have to wait your 2 years for your autism diagnosis before you can start thinking about those processes. And maybe your child isn't autistic and you're thinking about it. Let's not wait 2 years to find out they're not, and then another 2 years to find out whatever it is, you know. So I absolutely would recommend people to jump online, you know, ask the adult autistic community questions and read and learn as much as you can, and don't necessarily have to wait for a diagnosis for that.
And there's nothing to lose, right?
No, nothing to lose. It's a win situation. You learn more about another aspect of our community that, you know, often don't get heard. You learn some great skills, some great communication skills that map great in any environment, not just an autistic environment. There's lots of wins. I can't think of anything to lose apart from time.
Time.
Which, you know, you're investing in yourself. So
you mentioned PDA. Anyone from your kids has PDA, or is it something that has to be diagnosed as well as part of that autism diagnosis? So we haven't had a diagnosis of PDA, and I don't know. It's not on the DSM-5, which is the current diagnostics perspective, if nothing else.
if nothing else, it was easier to do the school run going that direction rather than blasting up and down the Hutt Valley all the time. But also that particular school he's in is somewhat plugged into my girls' school in the sense they share knowledge. I don't really know much about the education system, but apparently like schools are on little cohorts and they can share their special education teams and notes and pass on ideas. And when I heard that my son's school was plugged into my daughter's school, I'm like, right, that's a great place to go. And we had a chat with the principal and he was all on board with the idea of universal learning, which is a big deal for us. So we thought it was a great fit. Rather than, there's another school maybe 300 metres from my house, we checked that one out too. And we decided that wasn't a very good fit for us. So yeah, we have a couple of schools at the moment. Yeah.
What criteria do you have?
What criteria do we have for education, like for a school?
For that school, like it's not, it doesn't fit.
Yeah.
Let's move on to the next.
That's a tricky question.
Yeah, it is.
It is. I'm quite new to the mainstream world. My mainstream child is 5, so I've only been doing it for less than a year. So I can't, I'm not an expert in the mainstream side of things. But the criteria we had was we get quite sick and tired of organisations who give you platitudes saying, yeah, we're going to make all these changes, we're going to do all these things, and don't follow through. Or they'll say, we'll make these changes and do all these things if it doesn't really disrupt or change how we do things already for the rest of the school or the rest of the group. And so when we met this teacher, we spoke about universal design or universal education. And the term universal design is where you design something to meet all needs, not just the ones that are the easiest to meet. So I work in architecture, so the easiest thing to think about in universal design is think about your door handles on your door. Are you going to use door handles? You can use door knobs. What's the height? If you make it nice and low, it's more comfortable for people who are standing to use them, and it's just as easy for someone in a wheelchair to use them. And so that sort of philosophy, we think about how can we meet as many people, how can we change what we do to meet as many people, is really important in the education system. So when I was having a chat with the principal trying to decide and screen which school would work best for our kids, that was one of the things we were gauging, is how does he feel about making sure that he can meet the child's needs, not the child meet their needs.
We're no longer in the 80s where autism is new, right? And I feel like schools should have started, I'm starting to rant now, schools should have started like adapting, like especially public schools, like adapting to the needs of everyone. So that at least, I'm an advocate of children, of course, for various reasons. It depends on from parent to parent, like, right, depending on the child's, what you call that, if it's in high needs or high, I'm messing up the term. If it's in a high needs, if the child is in a high needs that requires like really focus on the education, it's okay. But for me, given for my son, because he's in a high needs, but we wanted him to practice or to start being I'm used to the noise in the grocery, something like that. So that's why I'm trying to advocate for my son to be in a mainstream school. So at least it's like when his brother or his sister will bring him when they grow up in the grocery, it's not going to be like new to him, something like that. So that's why we're kind of like, when I hear stories about schools that are not yet, many of the schools are not yet adapting to that. I feel like, how are they gonna survive the jungle if the school is not kind of like accepting something like that? So it's really tricky, like in a sense. In terms of the whole journey on your part as a dad, what's the most challenging situation that you've encountered?
I mean, as a parent, I'm hopelessly outnumbered. I've got 4 kids and got 2 hands. So I've had some pretty fun, hairy situations out and about where I just don't have enough arms to get everybody up. Been through my share of meltdowns, absolutely. But I tend to view the meltdowns as something I've missed as a parent. There's often warning signs. So a lot of people sort of look at meltdowns as people's cups getting full. So let's say, for example, you're on your way to school and you take a slightly different route to school to avoid traffic, right? And your child can handle that, but you're pouring a little bit of water into their cup that day. I say that actually. My boy is into monsters. There's a bit of a parallel between monsters and dinosaurs now in our space, and so we're just getting into the Jurassic Park movies, which is totally age inappropriate, but I do not care. He loves it. He knows what's real. He knows what's not. Yeah. You ask him what's his favourite dinosaur. You think, oh, it's T-Rex or a Stegosaurus. No, it's a Pachycephalosaurus. Wow. Just awesome. For what it's worth, a Pachycephalosaurus is the two-legged dinosaur with a big bone head that smashes its head into other dinosaurs. Yeah. So that's his favourite dinosaur, which is awesome. Or he'll know, he can tell you the difference between a Brachiosaurus and, a Apatosaurus, which look very similar, but he knows one stands up, one stands long. Ankylosaurus. He knows all the technical terms. It's great. Yeah, lots of fun.
So amazing. Yeah, there's so much in that dinosaur. I don't know why. I mean, it's so interesting for kids. I mean, for me, it's like the name that you just mentioned. Like what? And then if we go back to that George story, why we suspect he is autistic as well, not because he's so fascinated with this dinosaur, but also among his peers, he's the only one who don't talk, who can't speak. Just dinosaur, and then his peers are kind of like mingling and socializing. My wife is the one who noticed it. Like, have you noticed George is not talking? Like, what? You still notice that? Yeah, he's not talking, and then he's obsessed with this dinosaur.
But you can use that interest and really get good communication. Yeah. That isn't verbal communication, but you can still use that interest and leverage it to get that in there. And I really wish kids that age knew that. Because it's adults that know that sort of stuff. You're like, that's cool, but...
Even not just dinosaurs, even just trains or engines or... And one of the main reason why we were talking about why I'm so confused with my life and I built up so many different channels and then I suddenly decided to just have one like this. Another is that I'm hoping that someone in later on, once I am able to progress this, someone listening might be listening about an autistic child, heard a story about a band, or maybe I'm gonna have a guest later, not this week, but some other time, who's a specialist, or he did a research in AI. So I'm hoping that some kids might be interested in those cases. So I hope they can find this and they get interest out of the conversations that we're having, something like that. So it's kind of like a vision that I'm seeing. So anyway,
I mean, so much knowledge in the world has been gained through autistics. I mean, historically speaking, like this, you can look at history and it's just absolutely scattered with people who are probably autistic. Obviously, the diagnostic term wasn't a thing back then, but knowing what we know now and knowing what we know about them then, you can say with some degree of confidence that XYZ person was autistic. And I think the world is definitely the world of this today, thanks to people who are autistic with their amazing focus on that particular area of interest. Yeah.
Have you learned about the book Neurotribes?
Yeah, I've read it. It's great.
Yeah.
It's so good. Well, I listened to it, audiobook, but yeah.
And the test debugger of Microsoft are all having Asperger's syndrome. I'm not sure if you've seen that. If you've seen that area somewhere. Yeah. Oh. When he's doing the research and then someone called him like, all of our testers here are they have Asperger's syndrome. Like, oh, okay. Now there's a pattern there. Because they're looking at the pattern so they can know if there's going to be a defect or not in programs, in application. So like, oh, okay. That makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, the ability to spot things. And, especially when they've got that amazing razor focus in that area of interest. Yeah. Use it, I reckon. Yeah.
So how are you feeling when you first learned about your daughter was diagnosed with autism? Is there a sense of doubt in yourself, like, what am I doing? Or
no, not like that. Not what am I.
Takiwātanga in his, her, their own time and space. being cool. The kids that are in his class that have autism, super cool.
Autism's about a different perspective on life.
And once you've met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person.
There is nothing wrong with having autism, you know. It's set in it. Once you know you got it, and it's set to get on with life a lot better, you know.
They bring change. They are non-judgmental.
Being different ways to thinking.
I'm autistic. If you don't look autistic, it is a very ableist statement.
Autism is a label. Forget the label and just live as normal life as possible. Autism is about hope.
Takiwātanga. Love Not Cure, exploring autism one strength at a time.